You wake up, you check your phone, you scroll, tap, swipe, respond. You get dressed, drink your coffee, drive the same road to the same place. And if someone asked you why, you'd have a reason for everything. But here's the truth. Most of what you do isn't the result of thinking. It's the result of reacting. Not because you're lazy, not because you're careless, but because your brain, the same brain you trust to make rational decisions, is running a con. A con so smooth, you never even question it. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize-winning psychologist and author of Thinking Fast and Slow, spent decades studying this illusion. And what he found shattered one of the most sacred myths of Western culture, that humans are rational. We're not. We're storytellers. We're justifiers. We're creatures of instinct who post-rationalize reflexes and call them choices. You don't think before you act. You act, then explain it to yourself later. And what's worse, you believe the explanation. Kahneman called it System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, intuitive, emotional. It's the ancient part of your brain that evolved to keep you alive. Snap judgments, gut reactions, instant fears. System 2, that's the slower, more analytical part. The rational self you believe in. It's thoughtful, but lazy. It hates working, unless it has to. So here's what happens. System 1 acts. System 2 justifies. You choose a product, a partner, a belief. Then System 2 swoops in, writing a convincing essay in your head about why it was the logical choice. But the truth, you already decided. You were nudged, primed, conditioned, and all your thinking afterward was just window dressing. This illusion isn't just personal. It's political. It's commercial. It's global. Because the system you live in, the ads you see, the apps you use, the headlines you read, they don't speak to your logic. They speak to your lizard brain, and they know something you don't. That if they can control your reactions, they don't need your permission. All they need is your attention. This is the beginning of the trap. Not a prison of walls or chains, but a prison of impulses. The kind that feels like freedom, because you never notice the bars. But in the next chapter, we'll peel back the curtain. We'll show you how your free will is being hijacked, and how those who understand this system can control not just what you do, but who you become. You weren't born a consumer. You were made into one. Not by accident, but by design. By the time you finish this sentence, your brain has already processed thousands of microstimuli, colors, sounds, emotional cues, subtle patterns, and not a single one required your permission. This is the world of the unconscious mind, a world where decisions happen before you know a decision was even required. And this is where behavioral economics steps in, not to protect you, but to study your reflexes like prey. Richard Thaler, Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky, they didn't invent manipulation. They just mapped it. They discovered what the market always knew. That logic is optional. Emotion is the shortcut. And habit is everything. You think you're scrolling to relax. You're being trained. You think you chose that brand, that belief, that behavior. You didn't. You were nudged. They call it a nudge. But what it really is a gentle push into obedience. Small changes in wording, design, placement, and suddenly you feel like you decided. Except you didn't. A famous study showed that simply putting healthy food at eye level in a cafeteria increased healthy choices. Not because people changed, but because the environment changed their behavior. It didn't persuade. It didn't explain. It just shaped. Now imagine that on a global scale, your phone, your newsfeed, your app interface, all engineered with precision. Behavioral scientists sit in meetings with tech giants and advertisers not to understand you, to exploit your mental shortcuts. This isn't evil in the cartoon sense. There's no villain twisting a mustache. It's worse than that. It's systemic. Because if you can control behavior without force, if you can drive action without resistance, if you can shape identity without awareness, why would you ever use chains? Why would you use censorship? When you can use algorithms, why build prisons? When you can build habits, and most terrifying of all, it works. Again, and again, and again. You're not a citizen. You're a user, a data point, a programmable entity in a lab that pretends to be a marketplace. And every reaction you've had so far in this video, it was predicted. Yes, even your discomfort, even your curiosity. Because the people who understand behavioral economics don't just sell to your mind, they rewrite it. And you think you're making decisions, but you're just responding to invisible cues like a lab rat pushing a dopamine lever. Still think you're in control? Good. Because in the next chapter, we'll show you just how deep the illusion goes. Welcome to the factory of reflex. You sit in the driver's seat. Your hands are on the wheel. You press the pedal. You steer. You believe you're in control. But what if the road was already chosen? What if the options in front of you were all pre-selected? And every decision you've ever made was actually a reaction to a controlled environment? That's not philosophy. That's behavioral design. This is the paradox of modern life. We believe we're choosing, when in reality, we're choosing between options handcrafted by someone else. Netflix gives you 10 personalized titles. Your phone offers a curated feed. The store you walk into has music set to the exact BPM that makes you move slower and spend more. You didn't decide. You just reacted. Even your outrage, your joy, your attention, they all came with pre-written scripts. In psychology, it's called the illusion of explanatory depth. We think we understand our preferences, but ask someone to explain why they believe what they believe, and the logic unravels. You didn't develop your taste. It was fed to you, one click at a time. Daniel Kahneman called it System 1 thinking, the fast, automatic, instinctive side of the brain, the part that judges a face in 100 milliseconds, the part that buys now and regrets later, the part that can be nudged without ever knowing it. System 1 doesn't ask questions. It responds. And the more you trust it, the more you believe your thinking, the more predictable you become. Here's the brutal truth. You don't need chains to be controlled. You just need choices designed by someone else. You don't need a master, just a well-funded team of behavioral engineers who understand your impulses better than you do. This is soft control, not through orders, through options. Let that sink in. The most powerful form of control feels like freedom. You think you're free because no one's stopping you. But what if freedom isn't about the absence of resistance, but about the presence of awareness? If you can't see the boundaries, you'll never know you're in a cage. Sam Harris put it bluntly, free will is an illusion, not because you're lazy, not because you're weak, but because most of your choices are just echoes of conditioning, neurons firing based on scripts you never wrote. And here's the most dangerous part. You don't feel trapped. You feel normal. That's how the system survives. There is no control, only conditioned reactions, only invisible scripts, only designers. And the designed, you tell yourself, I chose this. But did you? Or did it choose you? Your brain is not a truth-seeking machine. It's a pattern-matching survival tool. It doesn't care what's real. It only cares what works. What keeps you fed, accepted, and safe. Even if that means lying to you about everything. Evolution didn't select for accuracy. It selected for utility. The harsh truth? Your ancestors didn't survive because they saw reality clearly. They survived because they reacted faster than they questioned. They trusted feelings over facts. They stayed with the tribe, even if the tribe was wrong. They avoided risk, even when the odds were in their favor. Why? Because evolution doesn't reward truth. It rewards reproduction. And so your mind became optimized, not to think clearly, but to think safely. Today, this same wiring lives in you. You think you're reasoning, but in reality, you're justifying. You buy something, then Google why it was a smart choice. You feel threatened, then build a theory about why that person's evil. You change your mind only after you feel safe doing so. The brain doesn't start with facts. It starts with emotion and then rationalizes. Psychologists call it motivated reasoning. You call it common sense. But it's not sense. It's self-protection. Let's go deeper. Take the confirmation bias. Your tendency to seek out what already fits your beliefs and ignore what doesn't. It's not a flaw. It's a feature. Your brain filters billions of bits of data every second. It has to choose what to keep and what to discard. So it defaults to what feels familiar. Because familiar equals safe. Different equals danger. You don't want truth. You want consistency. You want reinforcement. You want the world to make sense through your lens, not to challenge the lens itself. Daniel Kahneman knew this. In Thinking, Fast and Slow, he revealed how two minds live inside you. System 1, fast, emotional, automatic. System 2, slow, logical, effortful. But here's the twist. System 1 runs the show. System 2 only shows up to clean the mess, to justify, not to decide. It's like a clever PR agent, working full-time to protect your ego. You weren't built to know the truth. You were built to feel right. That's why we cling to ideology. That's why we reject uncomfortable facts. That's why we feel threatened by nuance. Because truth is complicated. But safety? Safety feels like certainty. So we trade reality for stories, for heroes and villains, for narratives that make us feel in control, even if we're not. Here's the haunting part. You could live your entire life inside a false narrative, never knowing it, never questioning it, because it always felt right. The human mind didn't evolve for truth. It evolved to survive in tribes, in illusions, in echo chambers. And now you use that same mind to navigate a world that no longer works the way it once did. A world of complexity, of paradox, of information overload. And your brain still wants to simplify, still wants to react, still wants to be right instead of real. You think you're a rational being, but you're not. You're a narrative machine, addicted to the feeling of being correct. The truth? It doesn't care how you feel. It doesn't care about your ego. It just island. But to face that truth, you'd have to give up your certainty, your safety, your story. And that terrifies the brain more than death. Because to lose your story is to lose your identity. And when that happens, what's left? Welcome to the market. Not the stock market, not the job market, the real one. The one you never knew you were part of. The marketplace of emotion, where attention is currency, outrage is leverage, and your feelings are the product. You're not the customer. You're the commodity. Every second, someone is fighting for control of your emotional state. Not your money, not your mind, your mood. Because once they have that, they can shape your choices. What you buy, who you trust, what you vote for, what you believe. Emotion is influence, and influence is power. So the world learned how to hack you by hacking your feelings. We used to sell products. Now we sell identity. You're not just buying sneakers. You're buying boldness. You're not just drinking coffee. You're drinking ambition. Every ad whispers, feel this, be this. They don't show you the object. They show you the life you could have if only you felt different. And when you feel insecure or excluded or small, perfect. Now they can sell you the cure. Social media is the new marketplace. But you're not window shopping. You're being shaped. Every like is a microdose of dopamine. Every angry comment is engagement. Every outrage cycle keeps you scrolling, addicted, agitated, emotionally manipulated. Platforms learn something dangerous. Negative emotions last longer. They travel faster. They bind people more tightly than facts ever could. So the algorithm doesn't show you what's real. It shows you what gets a reaction. The louder, the better. The angrier, the stronger. The more divisive, the more profitable. You think your anger is yours? That your joy is authentic? That your sadness is real? What if they were installed? Triggered? Programmed? Emotions don't just happen. They're prompted, primed, harvested. Politicians do it. Marketers do it. Movements do it. Make you feel something, so you'll do something. React before you think. Click before you pause. Choose before you reflect. Here's the brutal truth. You are most valuable when you are emotional. Not when you're calm. Not when you're reflective. When you're triggered, because emotion breaks logic. It opens the gate. It hands over your autonomy, voluntarily. And once you're inside the system, you don't even realize what you've lost. Your feed becomes your filter, your opinions, your echo, your choices, just reactions wearing masks. Sam Harris warned us, we are not the authors of our thoughts. But worse, we might not be the authors of our emotions either. So if your reactions are predictable, they are programmable. And if they're programmable, they're profitable. That's why emotional intelligence isn't just a virtue anymore. It's a defense mechanism against manipulation, against addiction, against the silent theft of your freedom. Because the moment you lose control of your emotions, you lose control of your life. But there's a way out, not by disconnecting, but by deprogramming. Start asking, why do I feel this way right now? Who benefits from this reaction? Am I being sold something, an idea, a fear, a role? If you can pause, you can reclaim your agency. In a world where emotions are engineered, calm is rebellion, clarity is revolution, and reflection is power. They want you reactive. They want you outraged. They want you addicted. But the strongest person in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one who doesn't flinch. Welcome to the new war. The battlefield is emotional, and the only way to win is to stop being bait. We like to think we're truth seekers, curious, rational, open-minded, but we're not. We're comfort seekers. And the most comforting thing in the world is certainty, not truth, not accuracy, not even reality. Certainty. Here's the paradox. The human mind would rather be certain and wrong than uncertain and right. Why? Because uncertainty feels like danger. Ambiguity feels like threat. And threat means survival is at stake. So the brain does what it's always done. It reaches for answers, even if they're incomplete, inaccurate, or invented. Because something, anything, feels better than not knowing. Daniel Kahneman called this System 1 thinking. Fast, intuitive, emotional, effortless, but flawed. It's how we form snap judgments, gut feelings, quick conclusions. We don't reason our way into most beliefs. We feel our way into them, then invent justifications after the fact. You don't believe because of facts. You believe because of feelings. And then you protect those beliefs like territory. That's why truth is so dangerous. Because truth is uncertain. It's shifting, messy, inconvenient. Truth makes you question what you know, what you've built, who you are. And people will do anything, lie, deny, even destroy, to avoid that kind of psychological earthquake. So we choose comfort over clarity, narrative over nuance, certainty over truth. Ask yourself this: when was the last time you changed your mind? Really changed it, not over trivia, but over something that mattered? If you can't remember, you're not thinking. You're clinging. You're doing what most of the world does. Building an identity out of certainty and defending it like a fortress. But certainty is a prison. It locks you into patterns. It blinds you to contradiction. It keeps you safe and small. This is the root of polarization. Why people can stare at the same facts and come away believing opposite things. Because they're not seeing the facts. They're filtering them through certainty. It's why arguments don't work. why data doesn't convince, why logic falls on deaf ears. Because you're not fighting ignorance. You're fighting certainty, addiction, and withdrawal is brutal. Sam Harris once said, "What we believe shapes what we see, not the other way around." In other words, you don't see the world and form beliefs. You believe, and then bend the world to fit. And the stronger the belief, the more blind you become. Because beliefs aren't just ideas, they're identities. And challenging them feels like an attack on the self. So we double down, dig in, dismiss. Truth becomes the enemy, because it threatens the story we've built. But here's the dangerous irony. The more certain you are, the more manipulable you become. Why? Because predictable people are programmable. If I know your beliefs, I can feed you narratives, push your buttons, trigger your outrage, earn your loyalty, all without you noticing. Certainty makes you a perfect target, because you're no longer thinking. You're reacting. You're defending beliefs you didn't choose, clinging to stories you didn't write, living in a worldview you never questioned. And the worst part? You think you're awake. But what if you let go? What if you opened your hand, dropped the dogma, and embraced something terrifying? Not knowing. Uncertainty. The quiet humility that says, I might be wrong. That's where thinking begins. Where growth lives, where freedom hides. Because truth isn't a destination. It's a discipline. And certainty? It's just a comfortable lie. So the next time you feel certain, pause and ask, am I thinking or just reacting? Because in a world of prepackaged beliefs, your only real freedom is to not take the bait.